Happy Saturday! This is episode number 105 of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you for joining me on this very rainy weekend evening. As usual, here in New York, I guess we should be thankful it's not snowing, but it's been miserable weather. We had a couple of good days there and right back to the SHIT. But if you're joining me on the YouTube channel, haven't done so already, and are enjoying the content, don't forget to click like, subscribe, comment, turn on those notifications. Or if you're catching up with episode 105 on the audio platforms such as Spotify or iTunes, same general rule applies. Click like, subscribe, and turn on those notifications. So I've already done 3 episodes on what I consider to be underrated film performances. And in all 3 cases, they're movies that have gotten high praise over time, whether Oscar winners, Oscar-winning type movies, prestige pictures, but sometimes you sleep on an individual performance because you're focused more on the movie as a whole. For example, I discussed Ben Cross in the Best Picture winning Chariots of Fire, which is an ensemble story, but his performance is very easy to overlook. I discussed Kevin Kline's incredible dual role in Ivan Reitman's Frank Capra-esque 1993 classic, Dave. And I discussed Cary Grant's really tight and somewhat of an electrifying turn as Roger Thornhill in North by Northwest, considered one of the great movies of all time and easily the most entertaining film Alfred Hitchcock ever made. It's easy to kind of sleep on the particulars and the specifics of what Cary Grant is able to do in that film. So with that in mind, number 4, and not in chronological order and not in order of how good the performance is. This is simply the 4th in this series. Clint Eastwood in the original OG 1971 Dirty Harry, a film which spawned 4 sequels of varying quality, and a movie that is generally regarded as one of the best movies of its kind ever made. And it was a groundbreaking, pioneering film in the sense that it's pretty much Hollywood's first R-rated action thriller. And if you just go by the story and don't focus on the performances, it is a very difficult movie. It is a challenging film that does more to make you question, not so much question reality, we're not in the science fiction realm, but question ideas of right and wrong and parameters of good and evil. And, when they even were promoting the movie way back when, 50 plus years ago, now 52 plus years ago, there was an idea of this is a story about 2 killers. Harry's the one with the badge, implying that there really wasn't that much daylight in between good guys and bad guys. Now, I don't agree with that, but it shows where Warner Brothers and the creative team behind the promotion of this film, that's where their heads were at. Harry might be on the right side of the law, but he's not opposed to putting a couple of bullets in you in situations where maybe there was a better outcome than putting a couple of bullets in this guy. But I digress. The backstory on this and how Clint Eastwood, in what I to this day consider to be, if you ask me the question, what's the finest piece of film acting in Clint Eastwood's career? I'm going to say Dirty Harry. Didn't get any, Oscar nomination, didn't get the kind of broad critical acclaim for the performance as he did in his later years with Unforgiven and In the Line of Fire. A Perfect World in a supporting capacity, he's tremendous. Bridges in Madison County. The fact that he's able to actually hold his own and stand there with Meryl Streep, who is just about at her peak in terms of emoting and hitting a difficult accent as if she was born in a town in Italy. Clint in Dirty Harry, not the first choice. And the script went through a lot of incarnations. But what he does is give a masterclass in how to be a movie star. And he was 40 going on 41 when the film was shot. He had ascended, but this movie put him over the top into the stratosphere. Now, the background is that a guy by the name of Harry Julian Fink and his wife, I believe her name was Rita, whatever that's worth, wrote a book called Dead Right sometime in the mid 1960s. And Hollywood was interested in Dead Right as a film project. And they commissioned a number of screenplays from people who would end up being major players in Hollywood, including the phenomenal filmmaker Terrence Malick, who was not that long out of college when he was hired to adapt Harry Fink's book. I've read Terrence Malick's Dirty Harry screenplay, and as much as I can sit here and tell you that Terrence Malick is he's one of the finest filmmakers ever to work in Hollywood, even though he doesn't have the filmography of the other masters, the people of his generation, Spielberg, Coppola, Lucas, Scorsese. He doesn't have their filmography, but his talent there are those that would argue he has more ability, that his painterly eyes are on a whole other level. But that's also besides the point. Terrence Malick's Dirty Harry screenplay, it had already been retitled Dirty Harry, is terrible. I'm sorry, Terrence. You're a fucking genius and a filmmaking deity, but that script sucked. And there were a number of different screenplays that bounced around that Warner Brothers was looking at, and everybody got paid. And Malick was a young man. He got paid for the script. So he probably made $100,000 back in 1970. So it's not like he did all this work and got nothing. But that script was shit. It was not good. It was not exciting. And I guess maybe it followed the book more closely, but who knows? I didn't read the book. The book has been out of print since the early 1970s, and I couldn't find it in any library, even at New York University's prestigious Elmer Bobst Library, which I spent so much time in the mid-1990s. It's not there. They had Don Siegel's autobiography, the director of Dirty Harry, a Siegel film, an autobiography, but no Dead Right. So that when the Terrence Malick version was being shown by Warner Brothers and their top brass to try to get people interested, Frank Sinatra supposedly was somewhat intrigued by the idea of doing that kind of a cop film. But Sinatra was, it's almost ridiculous. He had a hand injury that he had suffered years earlier, supposedly while he was shooting the original Manchurian Candidate. So he couldn't do it. And then allegedly, even though the two guys had a complicated relationship, supposedly John Wayne was approached with that script. And Wayne was not that old. He was around 60, maybe not even, but he seemed older. Wayne actually recommended Eastwood, a guy whose movies he didn't entirely like. I feel like he already was having problems because Clint's interpretation and the Western movies he made, even in the 60s, were not the kinds of films that the Duke, in this case, John Wayne, Pilgrim, would have made. But he respected Clint's talent. He just may have thought High Plains Drifter was, he would never have made a movie like that in a million years. John Wayne was not about rewriting and revising the Western genre. He was about doing things the old school way, like The Searchers. And Clint Eastwood would have never made a movie like The Searchers, much as John Wayne would have never in a million years made High Plains Drifter. So Clint Eastwood and Don Siegel had worked together on Coogan's Bluff, which is a sort of urban Western. It starts in Arizona in the current day American West and then moves to New York City. And Clint has a lot of laughs with that. They worked on Two Mules for Sister Sarah, which is also a Western, but of the time, 19th century. It's not that good. The best thing to come out of that movie, which is now a kind of funny historical quirk, everyone on the cast, in the cast and crew, with the exception of Clint Eastwood, became sick to varying levels during the production. With Shirley MacLaine, a joke was she couldn't get out of the bathroom or the trailer because she was so sick. Everybody got nailed by Montezuma's Revenge, except Clint, forward thinker. He's in his 90s now, and you look at him, he seems like a doddering old man because he's 93 going on 94. But Clint was so far ahead of everybody else. This was in the late 60s, 1970, and he was having bottled water, fresh meat, fresh vegetables, and fresh fruits flown to location at his cost. And, if other people on the cast and crew were interested, he was willing to share. Now, he's eating pineapples and papayas and meats and vegetables, and everybody else is chucking their guts up or can't stop taking a shit all fucking day, like Shirley MacLaine. They had to like drag her out of the bathroom to shoot her scenes. It must have been horrendous. But Clint and Don Siegel had worked together, and even on Play Misty for Me, which was Clint's directorial debut, Fatal Attraction before Fatal Attraction, for the younger generation who might not be familiar with actually either of those films. Fatal Attraction is now 36 and a half years old. But they worked together on Play Misty for Me also. And that was Clint's directorial debut. And Don Siegel was in the movie in a smallish role. Clint wanted him there, and Don did his pal a favor in case there were issues, because it was Clint's first time in the director's chair. And not surprisingly, he was stupendous. His direction is marvelous in that film. But the idea is that the two guys, Don and Clint, wanted to do another film together. And history sometimes deals these weird hands where you feel as if some larger forces are at work, because things happen of such stupidity you can't believe it's real, but it is. So Warner Brothers contacted Don Siegel sometime in, I guess, late 1970, after Clint Eastwood had wrapped Play Misty for Me, and Don was done with his acting work in that film. And they said words to the effect of, we hear you're interested in making maybe another movie with Clint, or what are your thoughts? We have a script we'd like you to look at. Okay, well, give me the deets. And Don Siegel had made some cop films previously. He did a movie called Madigan. He had done films dealing with Law and Order, Riot and Cell Block 11. So they said, well, we have this script. It was based on a book, whatever the rigmarole. And, Siegel was high enough in the industry, it may have actually been one of the heads of production at Warner calling him, not just a random creative executive on the phone. I don't know who was on the call with him. Now this would probably be reported, on social media. Hey, Don Siegel is in talks or whatever. So whoever's on the phone with Don Siegel says, we have a script. It's based on a book. It's about a San Francisco homicide inspector trying to stop a serial killer. And the idea was it maybe was loosely based on the Zodiac case, which was ongoing. But that part, again, I haven't read the book. That part I'm not sure of. So Don Siegel says, okay. And then the executive or one of the heads of production says something like, we have a bunch of scripts that we've commissioned for this, but we're going to send you the script that we want to do. Yeah, no shit, Sherlock. Go ahead. So they send Don Siegel a screenplay, and he loves it. He passes it to Clint Eastwood. He doesn't call Warner Brothers back because he's not making this movie without Clint. Calls Warner Brothers back, and doesn't call Warner back, gives the script to Clint. What do you think? Clint reads the script and says, wow, holy shit. Holy shit. He can see it in his head. This is going to be phenomenal. There's so much great stuff. There's the political and philosophical angles. We're going to get ourselves into hot water, but I love it. Let's do it. So Don Siegel calls it back, Warner Brothers. He may have even gotten to talk to Jack Warner for all we know, and says, okay, Clint and I are in. So needless to say, Warner Brothers is over the moon. They're fucking thrilled that they've got a director they love. He'd also done the original Invasion of the Body Snatchers, still top 10 greatest sci-fi movies ever made to this day. And Clint, on the rise, was knocking out one hit after another and had formed his own production company on the Warner Brothers lot. Malpaso Productions, the man from Malpaso. That's why I refer to Clint Eastwood as the man from Malpaso. Again, not something that occurs in a vacuum. So they sign the contracts. They're all ready to go. And Don Siegel is scouting locations and Clint is prepared. And then just before they're getting ready to start the shooting, Don Siegel receives a copy of the shooting script from Warner Brothers. This is standard practice. You get a copy of the shooting script. Whatever they've already sent you, the shooting script will be marked differently, all that stuff. Don Siegel gets a copy of the shooting script, and when he looks at it and it says screenplay by Terrence Malick, he freaks out. Because the script that they sent him was by a guy that Siegel had worked with and knew and really liked as a writer, Dean Reesner. He read Dean Reesner's draft. Dean Reesner had been commissioned to write the screenplay sometime prior, and Warner Brothers did not like the Dean Reesner version of the book Dead Right. They preferred Terrence Malick's version. When Don Siegel called, "What the fuck, you asshole sent me the wrong script," whoever he was talking to on the phone says, "Oh my God, Don, we sent you the wrong script in the first place. We think the Reesner version is trash. This is what we want to make. This is the movie that we thought we were getting." Don Siegel basically says, "Well, fuck you. I looked at this script. It's nothing like what I would want to do. I would never have wanted to make this. This isn't that interesting. I flatly prefer the Reesner version." "Well, we're sorry, Don." "Okay, fuck you. I'm out, and I'm taking Clint with me." Hangs up the phone. Don Siegel, history tells us, continued to sit by the phone knowing that it was about to ring, that Warner Brothers was not going to X out Clint Eastwood as star of this kind of property. 30 seconds later, they call back. "All right, Don, you know what? Sorry we got a little heated. I know you were upset. We made the mistake. But if you're telling us you and Clint will make this movie, we're going to trust your judgment on this. Because Clint hasn't guided us wrong, and you've been great to us going back to the 40s. I don't know if he actually said back to the 40s, but Don Siegel had a long-standing, he worked on Casablanca. He wasn't the director, but he worked on the montages and titles. They loved Don Siegel's talent. So Don Siegel and Clint Eastwood make Dirty Harry. The only reason they made it is because they got sent the wrong script. Because if Malick had been sent the correct script, he would have read 2 pages and said, "This sucks. Pass." So Clint Eastwood in the movie, in the world of the film, it is easy to sleep on his performance because there are so many different things happening. Society as it was in 1971, San Francisco as it was in 1971, questions of police and government and people at the street level, right and wrong, good and evil, lines blurring, Constitution, 14th Amendment, Second Amendment, First Amendment, Fifth Amendment, all of these things are in the movie. And what Clint Eastwood does as San Francisco Homicide Inspector Harry Callahan, he does something that it's almost impossible to do because Harry Callahan he's not a particularly likable guy. He is very driven and motivated, and he's a man of integrity. He's a man of enormous integrity. But sometimes that integrity will lead him in directions where you would say, ooh, as he says to one of the bank robbers in a famous opening sequence, The character of Harry Callahan. There are moments in the film where even though Clint never breaks the fourth wall, he is doing movie star things within the context of this very challenging, somewhat disturbing story. For starters, the opening bank robbery sequence, which is one of my favorite scenes in any movie, because you're not expecting it. If ready for it, you're just watching a movie, and the inspector is having lunch at his local, luncheonette or coffee shop or whatever it is. And it's the only sequence in the film that was shot on the Warner Brothers backlot. Most of the movie was shot on location using real San Francisco locations. And Don Siegel was so good, just the way he moved the camera through space. You know early in the film that you're in the hands of a master filmmaker, a great filmmaker. I mean, Don Siegel, you look at his career, he's a notch or two below the all-time greats, but at his peak, he was able to do things like Dirty Harry, like the original Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Didn't happen in a vacuum. He wasn't just a guy showing up who they gave a directorial job. He had a great eye, and he was able to elicit really strong performances from the characters, even in the smaller roles. But the bank robbery sequence, the way that Clint's character handles it, the guy is just so cool. He is ice. He walks into the middle of a bank robbery, literally chewing on a hot dog. And while he's still chewing on a hot dog, pieces of hot dog and bun are flying out of his mouth while he's engaging in a shootout with the bank robbers. And it's not pandering. He's not winking at the audience. He's not doing things that, and this is not really a criticism, that present day actors do where the audience, it feels like they're in on the joke. He's not doing any of that. It is a straightforward 3 minutes of film. But the way that he does it, it puts the audience on his side. This is the star, and he is acting like the star. And throughout the movie, we have moments where we're entirely sympathetic to Inspector Harry Callahan, and moments where we might say, I don't like this. I wish he hadn't gone down this road. Now we're getting into territory where he himself, if this were real, would probably be going to jail. But through it all, as much as we may take issue with actions that he takes, decisions that he makes, we always understand why he does it. Because without him preaching, we understand this guy, in his way, has his own code, as does a James Bond. He has his own moral code that he will not break. He might be a dark knight, but it's easy to see him still as a knight, because there's no question his heart is in the right place. And when shit really goes sideways, and there's a famous extended sequence where the Scorpio killer, which, as I said, was loosely based on the Zodiac killer, and even in the movie Zodiac, there's a famous scene where Mark Ruffalo's Dave Toschi is at the premiere of Dirty Harry. Like, they somehow managed to get the real San Francisco Police Department on board with Don Siegel's film starring Clint Eastwood. And Mark Ruffalo's character he ain't having it. He's like, they're making fucking movies about this shit. But in the world of the movie, we understand the why. We get the anger. And there is an extended sequence, and this is not something that happened in the real Zodiac case. It would have been better if it was. But in the world of the film, Clint's character captures what we as the audience know is the killer. It's not like we're in Zodiac where you have a couple of guys, well, it might be this guy, I like that guy, and we're not really sure. We as the audience know who the killer is. This is not a murder mystery. It has mystery elements, it has thriller elements, but it is not a murder mystery. We know exactly who the bad guy is. And so in this extended sequence where Clint, in a rage, is nearly killed. He is beaten to within an inch of his life by Scorpio. And of course we identify, and not just because it's Clint. This is somebody who's trying to find a girl who has been kidnapped and raped and left in a hole to die. And he's doing his best. He doesn't know this girl, but this is his job, his duty. He's been discharged. You have to meet with this guy, and he's going to fuck with you. And that's exactly what happens. He nearly gets killed. And he gets lucky. He gets lucky, he survives. And then later on the same night, as he can barely talk and having difficulty really moving because he's got a couple of busted ribs and he's probably got a concussion, he finds the guy, gets another couple of breaks. If you want to say the miracle of movies that, this wouldn't happen in real life this way, probably not. But he corners the guy and he breaks pretty much every rule of being a police officer, whether it's 1971 or 2024. When somebody says, read me my rights, officer, you got me, or words to that effect, that's it. But Clint, not only, that ain't enough for him. Not only does he torture the suspect, but he puts it in his report. He doesn't try to hide anything. And that's a kind of undersold thing in this film. Because in theory, he could have roughed up the suspect and said, I got a confession out of him. I held my gun to his head, whatever. But he apparently, in explicit detail, explains in his report exactly what he did. The guy could have been armed. I shot him in the leg and I held my gun on him until he told me where the location of the girl. But he didn't do that. He literally explicitly explains what he did. So he's not a liar. He wasn't trying to fix evidence. He just, hey, this is what happened. Let's go. Let's go. Let's get this guy. I just brought him in. Let's prosecute. Let's convict. And of course, because of the nature of the way that Harry Callahan apprehended the Scorpio killer, We gotta let the guy go. You can't do what you did, Inspector Callahan. Now, they don't say in the movie, why didn't you just lie on the fucking official report? You could have made something up. Because if the guy then starts saying, well, he tortured me, you could say, fuck you, I didn't do anything. We may take issue, and there's an extraordinary shot in the film. The San Francisco 49ers used to play at what was called Kezar Stadium before Candlestick Park. And the Scorpio killer lives there. He works with the groundskeeper. He has an actual job. His job is not serial killer. And Andrew Robinson, a terrific actor, really sells that part. But when Clint could easily get away with it, but he doesn't. He's not interested in doing anything other than this is who I am and the letter of the law and telling the truth. So because of this absurdity, and Clint can't believe it, you would think that it would have clicked in his head. If I do it this way, I'm going to get in huge trouble. I could potentially go to jail, let alone lose my job. But it doesn't click. Here's what happened. Here we go. Let's prosecute. They say we can't. We don't have anything because it was an illegal search and all of this stuff. And we may lose Clint. It's the kind of scene that you watch it at one point in your life versus another. You might come to the conclusion Clint's character is horrendous. You can't do that. I don't care what the circumstances. Or I understand why he did what he did. But I also understand why they can't prosecute. The judge is not just being an asshole. He's saying, look, here's the letter of the law. Here's your report. We can't go forward with a trial. We just can't. But the anger, the rage, and the sadness, how Clint comes across. There's another scene that's not really given enough play when you talk about the strength of Clint's performance. So when his partner gets wounded during this terrible sequence where the killer runs him around town and beats him, meaning Clint's character, Harry Callahan, to within an inch of his life. And as Clint's partner, who shouldn't have been there, and that's the thing, if the San Francisco Police Department, if they had done exactly what the superiors had said, Harry Callahan would have been executed and they never would have found the girl's body or anything. But because Clint, again, plays dirty, it ain't called Dirty Harry just because he does all the dirty jobs. He's not afraid to play dirty. If Harry follows the letter of what his superiors are telling him, he is killed that night and nobody finds anything. He's already dead. But during that crazy scrum, as it appears that Harry is going to be killed, his partner saves his life. And then Clint, who has a knife on his leg, which is also illegal, manages to wound the attacker, and that's what sets up this scene of torture. Luckily, his partner, played by another wonderful actor, Rennie Santoni, who 15 years later played Sylvester Stallone's partner in the kind of Dirty Harry homage / ripoff Cobra. Character has the same name. I like to think it's the same guy who went back to the police force. His name is Gonzalez in both movies. Do we really think that's an accident? It's not. But there's a really wonderful scene in the film. And the movie is wall-to-wall violence. It's nonstop carnage. And watching it now and saying, my God, this film is 52, 53 years old. I can't believe they were making movies like this. That there's this much bloodshed, this much dirty stuff, nasty business, law breaking by the good guys, and 10 times worse law breaking by fucking psycho here. But one of the few quiet moments in the entire film is when Clint, as Harry Callahan, goes to visit his partner who has been wounded while saving his life. So he's grateful. And Clint, when he realizes that Chico, his partner, Chico Gonzalez, is not coming back to the police force, because he just started. He has a teaching credential. He was very lucky not to be dead. He has a wife. Maybe they want to have a family. He's going to walk away. And we realize, even at this point in the film, it's well over halfway through the movie when Clint visits Chico at a rehab facility. It's very nice, and you can tell he's recovering. He's a young man. He's going to be okay. And the men shake hands, and it's a really nice moment. And then his partner's wife, don't know the name of the actress, she's very solid and very quick role, walks him out. And she pretty much takes the responsibility for getting her husband to quit the police force, even though he pretty much just started. And this is something he really wanted to do. And they have a conversation, and the woman says something to the effect of, doesn't it drive your wife crazy? The not knowing, the long hours, the fear that some lunatic like this guy is just going to take a shot at you, and that's it. And Clint doesn't get into it right away, but then he says, she never really got used to it, or words to that effect. And then the woman looks at him, realizes that she maybe hit a nerve, and Clint said, she's dead. She was driving home late one night and a drunk crossed the center line. There was no reason for it. And in this moment, even though Clint is not emoting, this is not the Clint of Bridges of Madison County crying his eyes out at the end of the film. This is not even the Clint 22 years later in The Line of Fire getting emotional when he recalled how he fucked up and did not move. He could have jumped onto Kennedy and saved his life. And Clint, as Frank Horrigan in The Line of Fire, tears up. And Rene Russo starts crying. And it's an incredible scene. But here in Dirty Harry, his facial expression barely changes as he tells this woman, the wife of his now former partner, they both could have easily been killed that night. She says, please forgive me, because she didn't know that his wife had died. Please forgive me. And he says, no, don't worry about it. And then he says, this is no life for the two of you. Meaning being a cop in his case and being the wife of a cop. I understand him quitting. This is no life for the two of you. Again, his facial expression never changes. And she asks him the $64,000 question. Why do you stay in it then? And again, behind sunglasses, without his facial expression changing, Clint Eastwood just goes, I don't know. I really don't. And he may not know, but we do know. And it's sad. This is all he has. We don't even see him go home in the entire film. It appears, for our eyes, he simply lives and sleeps at police headquarters. His job is everything. There are people who are consumed by their job. As far as we know, he does nothing else other than be San Francisco Homicide Inspector Harry Callahan. But that scene, after all of the craziness of him violating the guy's civil rights and the Constitution, and we're lucky you're not being indicted, we can't go after this guy thanks to you, we understand him. And it's really sad, because he is a young man. He could do something else with his life. He could start over. He doesn't have to be this if this isn't what he wants. So as the story goes forth, we see more of these kinds of angry moments where he starts following the killer, hoping the guy will slip up. And it is really an incredible film. It's an exciting action film and a great thriller just from the level of edge of your seat excitement and entertainment. But when it's all said and done, and the movie ends, and it's not really a spoiler to say, though, as much as in the 70s, a lot of heroes, even big stars, such as Clint, in some of his movies, like in The Beguiled, which was earlier that year, but Beatty in The Parallax View, Jack Nicholson in Chinatown, Dustin Hoffman, even in a movie like Marathon Man, where he kind of wins, but he kind of doesn't really win anything. The 70s were a time where the big stars got their heads handed to them and didn't always. Gene Hackman in The French Connection. They didn't always win. There was ambiguity. There was shaky morality. Gene Hackman again in Night Moves. Dirty Harry on one level ends triumphantly. The dragon is slain. You got the bastard. But Clint's final actions, the last minute of the film, sorry for a spoiler, because it was much debated and Clint didn't want to do it. The scripted ending has him alone, so fed up with the fuckery that he has dealt with throughout the course of this film, he is done being a cop. He takes his badge and he throws it into the water. Much like many years earlier, well, 17 years earlier, now it would be 60 years earlier or 70 years earlier, yes, 70. Much like Gary Cooper does at the end of High Noon, where he essentially renounces his sheriffdom, his badge. The scripted ending had Clint flipping his badge into the water. Now, Clint Eastwood, 40 going on 41 when Dirty Harry was shot, did not want to throw his badge into the water. He's told director Don Siegel, and they had a great kind of back and forth relationship, Clintus and Siegelini. Clint, in his kind of devilish way, called Siegel Siegelini. It was supposed to be like Mussolini because Don Siegel was tough. He was a bit of a taskmaster as a filmmaker. He didn't want to throw his badge in the water, and he kept saying the same thing. Don, I don't like the idea that Harry is quitting. Clint, he's not quitting. He's just frustrated with this bullshit. He's frustrated with a system that made him do this. That if he had followed the rules, if he and his partner had followed the rules, if they had done what they were supposed to, first one of them would have been killed, then the other would have been killed. He's not okay with anything that has transpired. He took issue with the mayor. They went back and forth on this for weeks. They could not agree. Finally, the last day of shooting, they've already taken care of Scorpio. He's out of commission. And Clint is ready to shoot the final scene. Goes up to Don, says, okay, Don, you're right. I agree. I'll throw my badge into the water. Let's go. Let's fucking do this. Don Siegel starts laughing. He says, Clint, I love you. You know I love you. What does that mean? Well, if I knew there was any chance in hell that you were going to actually do the badge toss, I would have had the prop master bring 15 of them. We only have the badge that you are in possession of in your wallet as we speak. You got one take to get this right, Clintus. One take. You fuck up, and it's on you, and you have to explain to everybody else why we have to pick up our shit and come back tomorrow. Explain to the studio. Now, he, I'm sure, wasn't really yelling at him. It was comical, but the idea was, we're going to run out of light. We can't send somebody back to the studio to get more badges. Get it right on the first take. And it was tricky because they had multiple cameras going at the same time. So Clint got ready, and famously in the movie, he looks at the badge as Lalo Schifrin's amazing musical score starts playing in the background. He looks at the badge, and he flips it into the water. And Clint Eastwood, fucking legend, going to be 94 in a couple of months, still working, making the movie Juror Number 2. It's in post-production, I believe, as we speak. The man from El Paso nails the one and only take of the badge throw and then the perfect walk away into the sunset like an old Western star, which Clint Eastwood was and had been a star of Westerns, as the music swells and the credits roll. And it is an extraordinary ending that adds so much depth and complexity to the film. If he had not done that badge throw, movie still works. It's still a great thriller. It was still a groundbreaking Hollywood R-rated action film. But without the badge toss, there's no sense of a greater force at work or a larger picture of good guys and bad guys and worse guys. And a question of, does Harry actually win? Or does the badge toss signify that he has lost? He has been defeated. It makes the movie that much greater. And I've argued that Dirty Harry is one of the best films I've ever seen. Certainly, you could argue top 10 in the 70s. That's neither here nor there. But it was a groundbreaking film. And for those of you who have seen it, if you watch it again, just focus on Clint's performance. Focus on how he, when he's not wearing sunglasses, how he acts with his eyes, how he acts with his face, and the subtleties in his line readings at various points in the movie. It is a brilliant performance for a guy who is not that expansive of an actor, but he's better than Gary Cooper. I think he's way more emotive and had way more range than Gary Cooper. I believe it is the finest performance in a career filled with so many incredible movies. It's absolutely up there with what he does in Unforgiven and In the Line of Fire and Bridges of Madison County. Those are three with some of his other finest film acting. And it is a masterclass in how to be a movie star, how to hold the camera like a movie star. The man from El Paso, Clint Eastwood, in Don Siegel's 1971 Dirty Harry, the fourth in a continuing series of most underrated performances. This has been episode number 105 of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you so much. I know I ran long, for joining me this early evening on this rainy day in New York. But if you caught this episode on the YouTube channel, haven't done so already, and are enjoying the content, please click like, subscribe, comment, and turn on those notifications. Or if you're maybe in the car, at the gym, or just decide that you want to catch this episode on Spotify or iTunes, same rule applies. Click like, subscribe, and turn on those notifications. I'll be back with episode 106 real soon. Till then, peace.